A frantic 911 call pierces the silence. He's got a gun. He's going to kill us. Send help now. Red and blue lights slice through the darkness as police cruisers skid onto a gravel road. Nearly colliding with a hulking tractor, officers leap out, weapons drawn, shouting through a megaphone, "Put the weapon down now!" Hank Reynolds, a broad-shouldered farmer in sweat-stained flannel, stands motionless beside his tractor, a shotgun hanging loosely at his side. His hands rise slowly, his voice a growl of defiance. "I'm on my own land, she's lying." Behind the flashing lights, Karen Pierce, a woman in a pristine pastel suit, points at Hank, her shrill voice trembling with theatrical panic. "He aimed that gun right at me. He's a monster!" Sirens wail as more cruisers swarm the scene. Hank's jaw clenches. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Karen wanted his farm. She'd slapped him with HOA violations, sent goons to chainsaw his crops, even tried to burn his fields to ash. Now, with cops closing in, Hank realizes Karen didn't want him gone. She wanted him broken. But this was no ordinary dispute, and Karen Pierce was just getting started. 6 hours earlier, sunlight spills over rolling fields where Hank's chickens peck for breakfast. Rusted tools, inherited from 2 generations of Reynolds farmers, lean in the barn's corner. The battered sign reading Est. 1948 still dangles from a beam, his grandfather's original handiwork. Hank grabs a bucket of feed and heads outside, boots crunching on loose gravel. Just another routine morning, or so he thinks, until he spots a cluster of HOA notices pinned to his fence. Violation, livestock, nuisance, offensive odors. Violation, unauthorized structures. Violation, non-compliance with community standards. He rips one down, reading the heavy-handed language. A slow chuckle escapes his throat. These folks are out of their minds if they think they can tell me what to do on my own farm. He crumples the paper and tosses it into a nearby trash bin. The day's barely begun, but something about these notices sends a chill through his gut. Not long after, Hank hears the crunch of tires at the end of his driveway. He sets aside the feed bucket and heads to see what brand of trouble is rolling in. A sleek SUV stops short. Out steps Karen Pierce, a woman in a pastel suit and immaculate hair that doesn't fit these dusty roads. A cluster of HOA board members follows her, dressed more for a country club than farmland. Karen offers a tight smile. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm here regarding your property's status within our evolving neighborhood." Hank plants his hands on his hips. "Evolving how?" One of the board members, a balding man holding a thick binder, clears his throat. "The new HOA expansions place your land under our jurisdiction. We have rules about livestock, odor limits, noise levels." Karen lifts a manicured hand, cutting him off. She addresses Hank with forced politeness. "We understand your farm has been here a long time, but times change. This area is becoming an upscale community, and your activities, an eyesore." Hank's jaw tightens. "My granddaddy built this place from scratch. My dad raised me here, taught me everything. I'm not leaving." Karen's smile flickers dangerously. "Then you'll face consequences. We have every right to enforce aesthetic standards, and we intend to." He gives a half smile. "If you think I'm taking orders from a bunch of newcomers, you're in for a rude awakening." Karen steps back, flicks her gaze to the board members. "We'll be in touch." They drive away, leaving Hank with a flicker of unease. He's dealt with city slickers complaining about roosters before, but something in Karen's tone, like she's relishing a fight, sets him on edge. That afternoon, a courier arrives at Hank's doorstep, delivering a letter stamped with the HOA's emblem. Inside, notice of fines, demands to cease agricultural activity and remove unauthorized livestock within 30 days. Hank laughs humorlessly as he reads. No authorized livestock on a farm? They've lost their damned minds. But as the day wears, humor vanishes. He's never battled a well-funded HOA. Neighbors who used to be mild or polite are suddenly cold. A few still wave or nod, but most have that same self-important tension, like they're waiting for Hank to capitulate. His phone rings. A neighbor, Tom, a retired Marine, warns him. Karen's serious, Hank. Saw her passing out flyers about noise and health codes. She's rallying folks who hate the smell of manure or the sound of a rooster at dawn. Hank thanks Tom for the heads up and sets down the phone with a sigh. He glances at the Est. 1948 sign. His father's voice echoes in his memory. Don't ever let 'em bury us, boy. Just as dusk settles, Hank hears the rumble of engines by his field. He rushes out to see a group of men wearing orange vests, their trucks half hidden by the tall crops. They're ripping out rows of corn, beautifying the land with chainsaws and weed trimmers. Furious, Hank marches forward, hoisting his shotgun, barrel pointed at the ground, but still an unmistakable warning. "Get off my property, right now." Karen steps from behind one of the trucks, arms folded, smirking. "You're in violation, Mr. Reynolds. We have the right to remove whatever's undermining neighborhood values." He glares, voice trembling with anger. "You have no right to tear up my crops." Her smirk widens. "Call it enforcement." That's when she whips out her phone and dials 911. "Help! There's a man with a shotgun threatening our crew." She steps backward, voice quivering on cue. "He's saying he'll shoot us if we keep working." For a split second, Hank can't form words. He never aimed the gun at anyone. He just wants them off his land. But as soon as Karen says shotgun, he knows the police will come running. Sure enough, sirens wail across the distance. Flashing lights flood the road. A cruiser screeches to a halt near the field's edge. Officers hop out, unholstering their... One grabs a loudspeaker. "Put the gun on the ground, sir." Hank gingerly sets it down. "I didn't threaten anybody." From behind the police line, Karen holds a trembling hand to her chest, tears brimming. "Officer," he waved that shotgun right in my face. "He's volatile." Before the cops can decide whom to believe, Mark, a younger neighbor who's been filming from across the road, shouts, "I've got the whole thing on camera." He never pointed it at anyone. Officers check the footage. Indeed, Hank merely held the shotgun, never raised it. They cast Karen a sharp look. "Ma'am, you said he threatened you. That's not what this video shows." Karen tries a new tactic. "Well, we felt threatened. Isn't that enough?" One cop shakes his head. "Not legally, no, and you're on his property, removing his crops without any documented court order." Karen's face tightens. She sees the crowd of neighbors staring, some of them filming her meltdown. She stiffens. "We'll see about this." The lead officer turns to Hank. "You're free to go, sir. Though maybe keep the gun inside next time. Prevents misunderstandings." Hank gathers his shotgun, ignoring the tension rolling off Karen like a thundercloud. He can tell she's seething, plotting her next move. Early the next morning, Hank finds a certified letter taped to his mailbox. Official notice from the county zoning office. Environmental violations, it reads, citing an anonymous tip. He calls the zoning office. They shrug politely. "We're required to investigate any complaint. We'll send someone out." Sure enough, a county inspector arrives that afternoon. The man wanders Hank's property with a clipboard, nodding sympathetically. "It all looks fine to me, Mr. Reynolds. Clean, regulated, livestock healthy. I'll file a report that you're in compliance." Hank thanks him, but worry gnaws at him. This is Karen's style, piling on nuisance complaints, forcing him to prove innocence over and over. Death by 1,000 cuts. Late-night raid attempt that night. Hank is roused by the sound of heavy equipment. He jolts upright, glances through the window, and sees headlights prowling near his livestock pen. Racing outside, he finds a group of men unloading animal transport cages from flatbed trucks. One man, face partially concealed by a cap, looks up with a sneer. "We're here to take your livestock, contracted by the HOA." Hank clenches his fists. "This is private property. You got 5 seconds to clear out." The man smirks. "You won't shoot." A click echoes in the darkness. Tom steps from the shadows, a shotgun casually slung at his hip. "He might not, but I'll happily hold you until the cops show." Within moments, sirens again slice through the night air. The would-be livestock thieves scramble back into their trucks, tires spitting gravel. Karen stands at the far edge of the property, partially hidden by a bush, phone in hand. She flashes Hank a look that can only be described as unhinged fury before sliding into a car and vanishing into the night. The police arrive too late to catch the trespassers. They take Hank's statement, frustrated by the repeated calls to the same address. "This is attempted theft," the officer says, shining a flashlight on the scattering of cages. "You pressing charges if we track him down?" Hank doesn't hesitate. "Yes, I am." By midday, the police manage to identify 2 of the men from partial license plates. The men roll over on Karen, pointing to an HOA contract she issued for livestock removal. That's enough for the cops to show up at Karen's door with handcuffs. Neighbors gather, phones in hand, as an officer leads Karen to a squad car. She tries to maintain her composure but soon breaks into shrieking accusations. "This is an outrage. I'm protecting our community, you're all blind." The sight of her, once so haughty and composed, yanked off in cuffs rattles the entire neighborhood. Some residents watch silently, realizing just how far Karen is willing to go. Others hide behind their curtains, not wanting to be the next target. Hank stands at the edge of his field, shoulders tense. He hopes this will end it. But the next day, she's out on bail. Karen wastes no time. She calls an emergency HOA meeting at the lavish community clubhouse. Tensions run high. Rumors swirl about whether Karen's lost her mind, or if she's just extremely dedicated to beautifying the area. The room is packed when Karen strides in, ignoring the furious whispers. She marches straight to the podium. "Neighbors, friends," she begins, voice quivering with barely contained rage. "I have been attacked and arrested on false charges." Meanwhile, a certain farmer disregards every rule we hold dear. A few loyalists clap mechanically. Most stare in uneasy silence. Karen slams a binder on the podium. "We're a civilized community. We pay our dues, keep our yards pristine, and invest in property values. Yet Hank Reynolds mocks our standards daily. That's why, effective immediately, I propose we file a class action lawsuit forcing him to remove his livestock and cease all disruptive activities." A rumble of voices rises. Some exclaim, "Are you crazy?" Others nod, wanting to punish Hank. One board member, Greg, stands up, eyes flashing. "Karen, you've already cost us thousands in legal fees. You tried to confiscate livestock with no court order. You got arrested. You can't keep doubling down." Karen's face tightens. "Greg, if you'd had the spine to enforce rules from the start, we wouldn't be in this mess." Suddenly, Mark, the same young man who filmed Hank's innocence, steps forward, waving a stack of documents. "Karen, would you like to explain these?" Karen's composure falters. She takes a step back. "What is that?" Mark faces the crowd. "It's an audit. Shows money missing from HOA accounts, siphoned into a private fund under Karen's name." The room erupts. Greg and several board members surge to the podium, demanding an explanation. Karen's eyes dart around, searching for a way out. The veneer of authority crumbles. A chant begins, "Vote her out, vote her out." Greg lifts a trembling hand. "I move for a vote of no confidence in Karen Pierce as our HOA president." "I second that," Mark says. Hands shoot up across the clubhouse. The decision is overwhelming, almost. Karen stands rigid, cheeks burning with fury as she's stripped of her title. She slams a fist on the podium. "You traitors! You'd have no community without me." She storms out, tears of rage cutting tracks down her cheeks. People murmur that perhaps it's finally over. Hank, who's standing at the back, quietly slips out, a knot of uncertainty twisting in his gut. He's not so sure Karen will back down. Late that evening, Hank is reflecting on his porch when a fleeting shape flickers by the barn. He rushes to investigate. His heart hammers as he sees Karen in a ragged state, hair disheveled, gripping a gasoline can. She's splashing fuel across the nearest patch of crops, breath coming in ragged bursts. Her eyes glisten with madness. "They voted me out," she hisses, voice cracking. "They turned on me. Because of you, Hank. Because of you." Hank sprints toward her. "Karen, put that down." She flicks a lighter open, the tiny flame dancing in her trembling hand. "I'll burn it all. If I lose everything." In a desperate lunge, Hank tackles her, slamming the lighter away. It clatters across the dirt and goes dark. Karen howls, thrashing beneath him. Gasoline seeps into the ground, the fumes stinging Hank's nostrils. Within seconds, neighbors, alerted by the commotion, arrive to help restrain her. Someone calls the police. Karen can't stop screaming about betrayal, about how the neighborhood owes her devotion, about how she'll destroy Hank if it's the last thing she does. Flashing lights return for the third time in as many days. Deputy Miller steps out, face grim. "Karen Pierce," he says, voice echoing in the hush. "You're under arrest for attempted arson." She fights as two officers clamp cuffs on her wrists. "I only wanted to protect the community." He's the threat. Miller shakes his head. "Ma'am, we also have evidence of your financial misdeeds. You're in serious trouble." They load her into the squad car. She screeches curbers until the door slams, cutting off her rant. As the cruiser pulls away, Hank stands panting, heart pounding with the close call. Even from behind the glass, Karen's glare radiates a chilling promise of vengeance. News spreads fast. Karen's meltdown, attempted arson, and alleged financial crimes become the talk of the region. Local stations run her mugshot with headlines like, "HOA president accused of arson and embezzlement." The remaining board members resign en masse. Homeowners launch lawsuits against the HOA, demanding the stolen funds be returned. At an emergency town gathering, residents debate if they should dissolve the entire association. Many are outraged that they've been blindly paying into Karen's personal slush fund. A final vote comes quickly. HOA abolished. The fancy clubhouse stands empty. The proud signs marking community standards enforced are torn down. Some ex-members breathe a sigh of relief. Others grumble that they've lost their neighborhood identity. Karen's case moves fast. Evidence is overwhelming. Video of her false claims about Hank's gun. Witnesses to her attempts to hire men to remove Hank's animals. Financial records showing outright theft of HOA funds. Security footage filled with gasoline. In court, her lawyer tries everything. Temporary insanity, self-defense claims, finger-pointing at a conspiracy by Hank and the neighbors. But the judge doesn't buy any of it. The gavel comes down. Guilty on multiple counts, including attempted arson, filing a false police report, trespassing, and embezzlement. She's sentenced to 7 years in prison with restitution owed to the family she scammed. When she hears the verdict, Karen explodes, shrieking that the whole town is corrupt, that she's the real victim. Bailiffs drag her from the courtroom as she howls about vengeance. With Karen behind bars and the HOA dissolved, Hank's farm stands unopposed. He expands his pasture, adds more produce rows, and starts a roadside stand. Locals line up to buy fresh eggs, honey, and vegetables at fair prices. Ironic, since many once supported Karen's efforts to push him out. Now, they see how valuable a real working farm can be. One day, Greg, the former HOA board member who once supported Karen, stops by the stand, hat in hand. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he mutters, eyes on the ground. "We were so fixated on property values we forgot you were here first." Hank gives a measured nod. "Apology accepted. Water under the bridge. Just don't start trying to run me off my land again." Greg cracks a faint smile. "Never again. Mind if I buy some tomatoes?" Hank rings him up. "They'll be the best you've..." Months pass. Hank's stand booms with loyal customers. The land looks better than ever, the Est. 1948 sign freshly restored. One crisp morning, a glossy black sedan pulls up. The driver steps out, sleek suit, leather briefcase. He approaches Hank, who's stacking crates of sweet corn. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. I represent a development firm interested in farmland in this region. We understand the HOA is gone, but that only opens more possibilities." Hank wipes sweat from his brow and regards the man calmly. "I'm not selling, if that's what you're here for." The man smiles. "We can discuss details. There's a lucrative opportunity here." Hank huffs a wry laugh, remembering how he once said no to Karen Pierce and all her misguided ambition. "I know all about opportunities, friend. Make your pitch, but don't expect me to roll over." The man glances at the flourishing fields. "We're prepared to offer something substantial. Zoning changes, new subdivisions, major profits. Isn't that worth a conversation?" Hank considers the horizon. The land his grandfather tamed from wild brush. He thinks of how nearly it was destroyed by a petty HOA tyrant. "Sure," he says at last, leaning against his tractor's wide tire. "We can talk, but be warned. I'm a lot more stubborn than folks assume." The man's confident smirk twitches, and they head toward the porch to discuss whatever grand plans the developer envisions. Hank knows the fight for his land might never truly end, but he stands ready, carrying the legacy of his forefathers, armed with grit, loyalty, and a willingness to push back as hard as it takes. In the distance, the farmland ripples under the morning sun. Life goes on, challenges come and go, yet Hank Reynolds remains rooted in the soil his family built. He's faced down false arrests, sabotage, and near arson. A smooth-talking developer is just the next hurdle. Whether it's a city slicker with a proposal or a rogue HOA president with a vengeance, Hank's ready to defend his legacy. And that, dear viewer, is how one relentless farmer toppled a ruthless HOA queen, proving that nothing stands in the way of true grit and generations-old determination.